Welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. Atlanta Motor Speedway, the Ambetter Health 400 qualifying just wrapped up, and we're here to talk about it. Joe San Diego, along with Jackson Todd from 36X Racing and Tanner Smith from Pit Box Press. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin Shell, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can invest. Link in the video description and our Buy Me a Coffee YouTube Super Chat. Jason M, thank you so much. Bought us a couple of cups of coffee last week during Daytona 500 week. He leads the leaderboard. You can get your name on the leaderboard by investing in the Grid Network. Link in the video description. I encourage everyone in the chat room watching, share your questions, opinions with us, because qualifying, gentlemen, wrapped up at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Ryan Blaney on the pole ahead of Logano, his other teammate, Austin Cindric, and Josh Berry. Of course, 3 Penske cars, the Wood Brothers. They got that technical alliance with Team Penske. Jackson with Ryan Blaney on the pole, with all the Penske drivers up there. Ford just overall strong. Does this indicate much, considering how Atlanta races like a mini super speedway?
Yeah, so I was kind of curious on that front. So I went back and I checked the winner's starting position in this era of Atlanta. Last fall, Joey Logano started 7th. Last spring, Daniel Suarez started 23rd, but Kyle Busch started 3rd and Ryan Blaney started 6th. Last 2023 in the fall, William Byron started 18th, but if you recall, that was a rain-shortened kind of pit mess. Spring of 23, Logano started on pole. Fall of 22, Elliott started on pole. And spring of 22, the first race on the track, William Byron started 12th. So, if you give Ryan Blaney an extra boost off of turn 4 in the spring last year, you're looking at, 1, 2, 3, 4, basically 4 of the 5 Atlanta races in this era being a top 10 starter getting the win. So I'd say that, yes, the qualifying does matter at Atlanta.
I don't think that it only matters at Atlanta. You have all 3 of Ryan Blaney's teammates. Well, if you consider Josh Berry a teammate, I do. I think that given their starting position, they are going to try to control this race from the very beginning. And with Atlanta being a bit more of a narrow facility, it's a little bit easier to, kind of predict where runs are going to come from, and you won't be dealing with as many 3-wide situations as you would at a Daytona or a Talladega. So it does make blocking and maintaining that track position a little bit easier if you have a strong car, and clearly every Penske car has a very strong car. I think that we'll probably see a Penske fest up at the front for most of the race. So I would definitely agree with Jackson that qualifying is definitely going to matter, especially if, tire wear ends up being a big problem as well.
Now, tire wear, that could be a big issue. I got a follow-up, because one of the things we know it could be more handling. There could be the tire wear. You have essentially 9 Fords started in the top 10, the lone Chevrolet, Kyle Busch. Could this allow Jackson the opportunity for the Ford drivers, especially the 4 Penske drivers, to, hey, let's organize, get that green flag, put ourselves in a line, and break away from the pack?
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to allow them for like a breakaway opportunity, but it'll let them control the race. I mean, from the gate. I mean, the Penske's, but also just the Fords in particular. They'll determine, what speed is this pack going to go for the first run? What are we going to do? I know everyone is really taking note of, we'll get into it a second here, but how worn the track looks heading into this weekend. So they're going to be able to control that early stage of the race. I'm sure they hope it's to their benefit. We'll have to see. But yeah, I think it's just more about controlling the early stages rather than like an opportunity to truly get away.
Yeah, not only are the 4 Penske, proper cars up at the front, but Front Row is also having all 3 of their cars with a Penske Alliance up in the top 10 as well. So it could be a group of 7 that breaks away rather than just a group of 4. I still don't think that we're going to see that with the next-gen car. Like, I know that this question is probably prompted by some of the Xfinity and truck races we've seen where we've, watched the pack actually get spread out a little bit. But I just don't think that that's going to happen because I just think these cars are just a little bit too even, like a little bit too equal at the next gen level to really break away like that for too long anyway.
I'm really curious because I'm wondering if that top lane, if we see like in the past years at Daytona where you get 4 or 5 cars and then that top lane just gets strung out high speed. I believe that's what we like a train effect, and then I believe that's what we were seeing a little bit last year when then in the playoffs Kyle Larson then had that tire go. I could recall it was that kind of situation, or they were on the bottom lane. But we did see a little bit of that single file. But it's going to be very interesting because, as Chase Elliott said during qualifying, this track has worn out, aged quite a lot. We've seen some of the photos across social media. It's not that warm out there. It was 48 degrees. The high for tomorrow's forecast at 54 degrees. So traditionally, that means you're going to have more grip with the cooler temperatures. With more grip, you could have a car where if it's not handling that great, but the grip's there, be up towards the front. But of course, less grip, you're going to have more handling issues. Less of the big packs. Traditionally, we'll see a little bit of a spread out field. However, 60 degrees is not going to be potentially met at all. It could be below 60 degrees. I bring up 60 degrees because I remember that was the temperature in Bristol. They talked about like it just never reached that point, and we saw this weirdness with the tires. Don't anticipate that happening, Tanner, but traditionally, since we're talking about cooler temperature, the more grips, we see a drastically different race than the past years at Atlanta.
I don't think so. I don't think we've seen a spring race here at the new Atlanta Super Speedway really get too warm. If I recall correctly, the Logano domination race that we had in the spring of 2023, I don't remember it being very warm that day either. I could be wrong, but that race was particularly uneventful for the most part. Especially compared to last year's 2 races where, we even had a banner bringing out a caution. So I think with that said, with the track surface being a bit more worn out, it does make me wonder what's going to happen to the tires. We did have those first 2 races at the new configuration where we had nothing but tire problems up at the front of the field. If you both remember correctly, I believe Tyler Reddick and Ricky Stenhouse both blew a tire out of the lead in one of the first 2 races there, which was pretty unfortunate. And with the high tire wear being, what looks to be a bit of an issue we might incur this weekend, I am a little bit more attuned to that this weekend, but I am hoping it'll be not as chaotic as the end of last week's race throughout the event, but that tire wear is definitely something that's going to be on everybody's mind.
Yeah, it's definitely still like a drafting race, right? Like that's what we've constructed here. That's the package we're bringing. But it's the most unique drafting race we'll possibly ever have that we're getting into this weekend. I feel like every time we show up to Atlanta, that gets like more and more true. That this is, we show up the first time and it's kind of like, oh, this is like a tight Daytona, and then it's like continued to evolve into its own thing. So what that tells me this weekend is like handling obviously is going to be very important, particularly tire wear. And somewhat, I don't know, sometimes we get on these Saturday shows and I pick a driver that's not like, like a pick a winner, like pick a driver for like a win, but just somebody to keep an eye on. And somebody I'd be interested to keep an eye on this weekend in particular is Denny Hamlin, because he's traditionally been good at the drafting tracks, right? Like the Daytona 500s we just talked about all week at Daytona week. But we haven't seen that in the next gen era. But we also know that Denny Hamlin is really good at managing tires and tire wear. So is there some spot that Hamlin can hit here between managing tire wear and his drafting ability? Is there somewhere where that hits this week and works out for him? So anyway, I just think Hamlin will be kind of interesting to watch this week.
Hasn't he been in an accident in every single race that he's done in this new configuration?
I mean, that sounds right.
I'm not saying that it can't go against the grain like Reddick did
No, but yeah.
last week, but yeah, he's definitely fighting an uphill battle in that way.
Yeah.
It was you bringing up Denny Hamlin. He did say in qualifying he doesn't anticipate to be the fastest. He's focusing on that race trim, and with what we saw, he wasn't the fastest, but they didn't seem concerned at all. So it could be one of those deals where, like you said, if Denny Hamlin just has a good, solid handling car, work his way towards the front, and I think he's one of the best drivers when it comes to taking care of the tires. He proved that last time at Richmond where we had that race with the tires and the fall off. So Denny Hamlin, definitely one of the drivers to watch. So close to win that Daytona 500 the last weekend. Of course, that was just a very chaotic. Had many talking, questioning about the quality of the racing. And this week on social media, I noticed we've been seeing more clips being shared. The 2005 Daytona 500 finish. That's been one I've been seeing. People talking about 90s super speedway racing, including Joseph Newgarden tweeting, bring back the 90s super speedway packages. And the last few races in Atlanta, they've been really much praised because folks compare it to something that we've seen in the past, not the current speedways, super speedways, where it just seems too chaotic and just a matter of surviving whenever the crash occurs. Jackson, considering we're going to be anticipating Atlanta to keep evolving, could this lead to potential goals for NASCAR to consider what a new super speedway package would look like?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope. We'll we'll see. But I think, I mean, my engineering background is slim. But I feel like a pitch that I've heard that I can get behind is like less drag. That would be, something that could help change the way runs develop. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I'll be interested to see what happens this week at Atlanta, honestly. As I've said, and we'll keep saying, this is different. This is a different drafting race every single time. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in tire wear being a factor too. If you can make handling matter a little bit more at a place like Daytona, that would maybe prevent some of the. If you have to focus on the handling of your car, if there's wrecks because of I feel like this was a big thing we talked about in the late Gen 6 era, where it was like wrecks and close racing because you're fighting handling of a car versus you're just in a pack of cars, so you're close together and then you wreck. Those are two very different things. And getting back to the difficult to drive, it's not just about navigating the pack, it's also about driving the car, leaning more in that direction is always a good thing.
Yeah, I completely agree that if we were to move in a more handling based super speedway package where the amount of grip in your car and what it's able to do with that grip is a little bit more prioritized, I think that would be ideal. Especially because, Daytona and Talladega haven't exactly worn out in the way that you would like to see tracks of their age wearing out. But at the same time, I also think that Atlanta itself races so differently from either of the other two super speedways that it's really hard to even include them in the same group, because I feel like with the straightaways being so much shorter at Atlanta compared to Talladega and Daytona, it almost makes it to where it's a completely different style of racing in comparison. The way that runs are generated and formed are entirely different. They reflect more on the, I would say, pre-air bubble era of super speedway racing, so pre-2014. With that said, I would hope that they can take something from Atlanta and port it over to Talladega and Daytona, but I haven't really seen them do that successfully yet, so I can't really say that that's something that we should be able to expect.
The way this track has evolved, the wearing of the track, the worn out surface, the handling becoming an issue. I think if we have a good solid race where we don't see that many cautions, the strategy aspect, and what I really like, again, since they've done this current configuration, you have to enter pit road starting from the backstretch, turn 3, the apron, come around. So those green flag pit stops will do a lot, and I think it is fun when we get those strategy aspects of, okay, the Fords are going to try to stay out as long as they can. What the Toyota Chevrolets will do. Super unfortunate that we did not have none of those green flag pit stops last race weekend at Daytona. 2 debris cautions prevented that from occurring. Now, last year, of course, this race got media attention all over because of the classic finish between Kyle Busch, Ryan Blaney, Daniel Suarez. Since last year, Kyle Busch, well, he went winless. Suarez hasn't won a race, hasn't really been a serious contender really for race wins. Maybe Atlanta last year until he lost his teammate and then he got overpowered during the playoffs. And then, of course, Blaney, he had a good year, finished second in the Cup Series. Qualifying Blaney, of course, on the pole. Kyle Busch, the only Chevrolet in the top 10. Daniel Suarez towards the back. I think it seems pretty straightforward, but knowing how this race could play out, Tanner, out of those threes, in what order do you think they'll be finishing from the highest to the lowest?
Blaney, Suarez, Busch is my highest to lowest. Daniel Suarez does not have a very good qualifying record at Atlanta Motor Speedway in this new era, but he has the second highest average finish of anybody and has only finished worse than 6th, I believe, once when he finished 23rd. And that was in the spring of 2023. Since then, he has been on an absolute tear, finishing no worse than 2nd in any of the last 3 races there. So I think it would be naive to think that Daniel Suarez won't find himself in the mix towards the end of this race. That said, I think Kyle Busch will find himself in the mix at some point in this race, but I just think the black cloud's just going to keep following him, unfortunately, through this weekend. So I think that Ryan Blaney's obviously got the strongest car, not by much, but he does have the strongest car in qualifying. And with all of his Penske friends up there, I just imagine he'll be in great shape come Sunday and throughout the entire event.
Yeah, Tanner, you convinced me. I'm pulling an audible over here. I had Blaney, Busch, Suarez, but you sold me on Blaney, Suarez, Busch. That was a really good case for Daniel Suarez. But yeah, I mean everything you said, Brian Blaney. I mean he's like favorite for this race, just like period. And then yeah, that was a really good case for Suarez. I agree with everything you said there. So yeah, Suarez and then poor Kyle Busch. I feel like last week might have been his chance. I feel like we said that a few times, and we are just running out of times to say that. Like, we're running out of time. I don't know. Anyway, I know we kind of like disagree on that front, Tanner, but anyway, last week was certainly a missed opportunity.
It was, but the one thing I will say, it is encouraging that Busch did come into this weekend with speed. Clearly making it to the second round of qualifying is what appears to me a massive improvement for RCR's speed as a whole.
Agree.
Yeah, the speed that he was showing looks really good. Dan Suarez, he is starting 29th in row 15 tomorrow, next to his teammate Shane Van Gisbergen in 30th. But this is going to be a very interesting race with everything those drivers have to do to just get that car handling, get up towards the front. Toyota, I thought they were going to be a little bit stronger, especially after what we saw at the Daytona 500, where we talked about really the Penske's were the only strong Fords. You could say maybe RFK, but not as much as what the Penske's Fords were doing. But qualifying the Toyotas, not exactly at all as fast as the Fords as I anticipated. Denny Hamlin, he was slow, but he anticipated that. He said he was more potentially focused on that race setup than qualifying. Bubba Wallace for a while was the only Toyota driver in the top 10, got knocked out. So we had no Toyota drivers in the top 10 shootout for the pole. As I mentioned, Kyle Busch, the only Chevrolet. Is Ford the strongest car in Atlanta, or could the Chevy and Toyotas be strong because they're more focused on those race conditions, Jackson?
Yeah, it's this kind of, I mentioned it earlier, but that late Gen 6 era, this kind of goes back to that as well, where all those qualifying sessions at the intermediates were like, okay, are you trimmed out for qualifying, or are you going to have the race pace? So it appears that the Fords went for the qualifying pace. But I talked about it earlier. The qualifying has shown as demonstrated itself to be meaningful here, and I also think when you account for the fact that it is just going to be a block of Fords at the front of this field, you can't pass at Atlanta like you can at Talladega. So they're going to be able to control the pace. They're going to be able to control the early race, and I mean, I guess it's possible that we end up late in the run, and the Toyotas have proven to have better handling. But I just think that control, that block at the front of the field, is going to be more impactful in handling because, I mean, yeah, I don't know. And then not to mention, like, if a wreck happens, I mean, like, that's not even accounting for that. So, but yeah, I would go. I would have gone the Ford route, I think, this week. Yeah.
It's like I said last week, the Ford is the strongest on the super speedways. It has been that way pretty much, I feel like, most of the Gen 7 era with the next gen car, and it just continued throughout last weekend and now into this week. Obviously, we had one particular outlier last week claim the pole for last week's race, but we might have a reason for why that happened the way it did. But with all due respect to the 19 team, I think the Fords clearly have the upper hand at the super speedway events, and today very clearly solidified that.
So I got in a follow-up question. If we talk about Ford being so strong, Chevrolet was not much of a factor at the Daytona 500, really.
No.
I mean, Byron went from 9th to 1st because of that last lap mess. Tana, I'll start with you and then go to Jackson. When it comes to Chevrolet, do you think there might be a concern, particularly if we start seeing it's like, okay, Fords are controlling this race, Chevrolet, they're just more hoping for the wild, unpredictable nature for wins? And could that be sort of a odd strategy considering this is a much older car that they have compared to the Fords and Toyotas?
Joe, you're practically taking the words out of my mouth that I said in our preseason predictions video. Yes, I actually do think it's a massive concern. If you're Rick Hendrick and you couldn't get more than one car in the top 10 for qualifying at Daytona, that's not good. That's like the opposite of a ringing endorsement of what your engine department's capable of doing. I'm not going to be concerned until I see them at Vegas, Phoenix, and Coda, but it's not looking good thus far. I'll tell you that much. It's not looking good for me.
Yeah, I'm just looking at recent results down here, and like, despite this lack of speed we've discussed, they just won the Daytona 500. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. won that Talladega race in the fall.
Where all the Fords wrecked themselves.
Right. But I mean, and then last year, Suarez won Atlanta and Byron won the 500 last year. So
it was a fraction of an inch from a Ford winning.
Right. They won though. Who cares? So I feel like, I don't know if you're going to, why would they focus on this? Like, if you're Chevrolet and you're like, all right, what are we doing this week? I'm not going to worry about the Talladega car. I'm going to work on the Kansas car, the Martinsville car. That's what I'm going to put the effort into. So, I mean, yeah, Chevrolet might be the weakest, but, like, they're getting the playoff points. So, like, that's my perspective on that, at least.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's something I've been curious because it's like in the past we've seen Hendrick Motorsports been so fast. Last year in this race, we saw the Fords get the front row. Same with Daytona. But William Byron won Daytona the last 2 years. As you mentioned, the craziness. Maybe there is a method to this madness Chevrolet has that, we're just going to focus on the mile and a half because saying you got the pole for the Daytona 500 is great, but really just got to survive the mayhem and just be there on lap 200 or 200 plus if we're in overtime. Now, one driver not having a good week at all because of a big penalty that came out was Chase Briscoe. It looked like Daytona was going to go great, but as you can see, he is no longer in the top 16. He is dead last, negative 67 points for an unapproved spoiler on that 19 car. So we are all have more points at 0 points than Chase Briscoe right now. So
Yay.
this is just something where I remember preseason I talked about, I feel like Chase Briscoe, he might have some pressures, like this is his best ride coming in here. The Toyota driver development is going to have more talent coming up. Now they get stuck with this huge points penalty. Tanner, from the high of getting that pole last week at Daytona, people saying this is what he needed to now this. How big of a test is this for Chase Briscoe, his team, to overcome such a gap?
I think if it was to happen anywhere, the Daytona 500 might have been the best, or I should say the least worst place that it could have happened, because he has 25 races to rectify the situation. And in a Joe Gibbs Racing entry, you have to suspect that they're going to have the performance necessary to claw him back into the points battle. But God, you got to feel for them with the wind getting taken out of their sails like this. Like, obviously we're going to assume that they're innocent until proven guilty, but you cannot take away 100 points and it ever feel good. And especially after they just earned a top 5 at the 500 on top of winning the pole, they had a really strong car. It's just really unfortunate for that 19 team, especially considering how much new they have going into this season. And I could still see them making the playoffs like on points, assuming we don't have 16 winners and they're not one of them. But man, that really puts a damper on their campaign. And James Small is going to be out 4 weeks. I think that's something that's not really been publicized enough. Is he going to be on the box this weekend while they appeal? I remember there's something in the charter agreement about crew chiefs being able to kind of stave off any sort of penalties until an appeal has been heard. But either way, losing your crew chief for 4 out of 26 weeks is never ideal.
Yeah, the thing that the spot that hits the most is the playoff point loss, I think, for somebody like Briscoe, because I think he'll get his way into the playoffs, right? Like he'll probably win where, I feel like this kind of where he's at, right? Like he'll probably win somewhere, like you just said, this JGR entry, like he can make the playoffs. But once you make the playoffs, like you need playoff points, like you need that buffer, and he doesn't have that. So, I mean, that's really the part of the penalty that sticks out to me. That playoff point loss. That's gonna be. I mean, that's multiple wins. That's hard. That's really hard to come back from, because he's not gonna get bonus points for the regular season as things stand. Like he's starting in the hole, and so he's not going to get in the top 10 of regular season points. That would be insane. And if he did, then he would have already, I assume, won multiple races. So, yeah, I think the playoff points hole is what stands out to me the most.
And those playoff points, they have proven to be so valuable in the postseason. 1 point being the difference between advancing, not advancing. Really, there's no chance for them to get the regular season championship unless he goes on an epic multi-race win after win after win. I just don't see that from this team. I feel you look at Joe Gibbs Racing. Bell, I feel, is one of the strongest drivers. He could have won the Daytona 500. Denny Hamlin still knows how to get the job done. Briscoe and Ty Gibbs, I feel, are the 2 drivers where people anticipate, okay, they might contend for some wins here or there, but not exactly a driver that's going to just go out there and be a championship contender week in and week out. This is just going to be a real big test, I think, for Chase Briscoe, what that team could do just to overcome this. If they make the playoffs, I feel that'd be a huge success, but if they make the playoffs and don't get into that round of 8, I think a lot of people will be pointing to, well, this is why. These penalties just took everything away from them. And of course, this race is only going to be 400 miles. So 100 miles less than what we had at Daytona. A shorter racetrack, but still just as fast with the bank and potential pack draft style racing. The stages are interesting. Lap 60, then 160, and then to the end, 260 laps, 400 miles, assuming no overtime. The fuel window is about 65 laps, so potentially green flag pit stops during the second and third stage, which we didn't get to see at all at the Daytona 500. Pit stops under the yellow, fuel mileage didn't become an issue towards the end of the race. 2023-2024, this particular race, in the first race of the year, no overtime, 400 miles. But 2023, we had 5 cautions. 2024, 10 cautions. Jackson, if we get green flag pit stops, what strategies do you anticipate? Are we thinking the manufacturers? Are we thinking off-cycle pit stops? Or do you think maybe even the tire wear could be something to determine the pit stops first and not fuel mileage?
That's what I was gonna say. Is I feel like we kind of got to wait and see what this tire is gonna do. I know that my strategy, if I was going into this race, I'm going the long stint. I'm going for the overcut. Kind of, I guess it's not really an overcut in this situation, but I'm going long. Because I'm not screwing around with that pit entry. That is crazy. At this place, I mean, last week at Daytona, we didn't even get. I mean, as you said, we didn't even get green flag stops last week at Daytona. Which, the phantom debris cautions. I won't get into that conspiracy here, but that is frustrating to me. But yeah, I'm going as long as I can without stopping. I assume somebody's gonna wad it up into turn 3, trying to get onto this pit road. And not to mention, because this is a shorter track than a proper super speedway, you are going possibly laps down in this shuffle. So yes, the tire wear, you might be turning like slower lap times out there, but like, man, I really want to push as long as I can.
So let me get this straight. You want to push as long as you can so the tires are as worn as they possibly can be while trying to get onto that pit entry.
Ooh.
I don't yes. Yeah.
I'm just checking. So the way I would approach this is, and it's probably the most vanilla approach possible, just split the stage in half. Like, obviously, you're going to go a full 60 if you can make it their own fuel, which it seems like everybody's going to be able to do. If you can go the full 60 in stage 1, then I don't see why you wouldn't just split it in half at 50, especially if tire wear is going to be a problem. You'll be able to make up that time on the people that are running long, more than likely, especially if you can pull in at least 6 to 7 other cars with you. I think that a string of 8 cars continuously drafting at Atlanta should provide just enough for you to, generate enough momentum and enough speed together to gain on a pack of like 15 to 20. So I would put my money on just being boring and going 50, splitting it in half every stage and going from there. But yeah. I think there is credence to what Jackson's saying, because we did have a caution, I think, during green flag stops last year because McDowell and Byron kind of wrecked each other. Or was there not a caution and it was controversial that there wasn't? I can't remember.
It was something like that.
Yeah, like I know that they wrecked. But other than that, I guess I'm a little bit fuzzy on that memory. But yeah, like this pit entry is definitely a challenge, we'll say. And yeah. I do think there's credence to what Jackson said about you could possibly go multiple laps down, and that would be a really big problem.
Yeah. And I guess I feel like I need to rein in what I said a little bit. I'm not saying like literally go all the way, but I am not going to be the first to pit, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm not going to start the pack down pit road. I'm going to let someone else initiate that. I guess that was I guess I presented it in a little more dramatic fashion than that. But that's what I was really saying there is I'm on the back end of the cycle. I'm not going to be on the front half.
Got it.
Not to mention, getting to the inside line can be very difficult. Just while we're talking
Yes.
about pit stops and this pit entry, like you have to get to the inside. It's not as anyway. So just another thing to mention there.
I think those are really good points, and that's why I'm hopeful we have these green flag runs. Because I'm curious. For instance, Fords, we know they seem to go the longest fuel mileage. How will their tires hold up? If the Chevrolets and Toyotas have the better handling, could they just go a little longer because we got better tires compared to the Ford drivers? There's so many stories I want to see play out. I don't want, oh, we got a caution. Everyone's going to pit at the same time. And it's just, it doesn't, I mean, the strategy is what makes this race really good. I don't think we need to see everyone just pitting all the time. The visual spectacle of a big pack is always fun, but I feel with this race, even if we get the green flag pit stops, just the nature of it, they'll all bunch up again somehow. Maybe you have a line of some Fords, but it's just going to be a lot of potential for strategies if we could have. Because even if, like you said, Tanner, the pit halfway through, break that second stage in half, okay, that's great. But if there's a group of Fords that stay out, and then all of a sudden you have that one caution, that just changes up everything. Where you could hopefully get some cars off cycle. So it'll be really interesting to see what all plays out. In the chat room, we asked the question, what's your favorite type of track when it comes to this racing product? Atlanta, Daytona, Talladega. Nicholas says Talladega is his favorite. And of course, Talladega later in the season, it's going to be much more similar to Daytona than what we're going to have here. With that said, though, let's get to pick a winner. We already had 2 races this weekend in the Repco Supercar Series. Cam Waters has won both, and as you can see from Tanner, he had picked Cam Waters for both races. Matt White leads with 4. He picked Cam Waters for the second race, and then Kobe, Matthew Bro both scored a point each. Already, we're seeing some folks in the chat room talk about their pick winners. We encourage everyone watching, comment, who do you think is going to win the Ambetter Health 400? And then we could also throw in there race 3 of the Supercar Series. Comment in the chat room. Tanner, let's start with you. When it comes to the Ambetter Health 400 at Atlanta Motor Speedway, who do you see winning this race?
I am taking the pole sitter. Ryan Blaney will be the winner of this race, and I don't think that his good friend Daniel Suarez will be too far behind him. I think that Ryan Blaney clearly has a very good idea of how to be fast around Hotlanta in its new configuration. Obviously, he holds the highest average finish of anybody, or I should say lowest, but I think you all get the point. The man knows how to get around this facility. He is super strong on these style of tracks, and it would be virtually impossible for me to say that he is going to be irrelevant on Sunday. So I'm definitely leaning towards him winning, and yeah, that'll be my pick.
I'm sticking in the Penske camp, but I'm going to be going with Austin Cindric. I'm kind of riding this Austin Cindric 2025 breakout hype train throughout this year. I think that's going to be one of my things this year. So I think it's going to start this week at Atlanta. I mean, obviously, a lot of the reasons Tanner basically just said for Blaney. I'm going to throw him over to Cindric as well. But yeah, I'm Austin Cindric.
Austin Cindric, he's looking strong. Matt White, the pick winner leader, did pick Austin Cindric as well. In the chat room, we got a couple picks, starting with Nicholas, who is going with Alex Bowman, Orion, inside Blaney. And Adam has gone with Joey Logano, Will Brown for Supercar Series 3. If Will Brown does that, that'll be the first win that's not Cam Waters of 2025. For me, for my pick a winner for Atlanta Motor Speedway, I think I'm going to go with a Ford driver as well, too. But I think I'm going to go with a driver that I think has the potential to win. He has a team. He has the equipment. You just need to avoid the trouble, put himself in a good position, and I think he'll do that because now this is his sophomore year, not freshman year. I'm going with Josh Berry to get the win in the 21 Wood Brothers.
Okay.
Just have a good, solid day. Don't get in trouble. That's the big thing. I think he could go ahead and get that win. Supercar Series, the third and final race of the weekend. Tanner, do you want to share who you think is going to win that race?
I'm just sticking with Waters again, I think.
He's won 2 out of the 3. Jackson, do you think it's going to be Cam Waters' sweep, or do you think another driver might get?
I'm gonna always on these supercar picks always get me. I'm gonna go with Will Brown. That's what Adam said, and Adam seems wise.
The defending champion of the series. It makes sense. That's a good pick. Very solid pick. I'm going to go still, just try to be more different, try to score the points if it happens. I'm going with Brock Feeney, Will Brown's teammate. Try to get that win, try to get something going to say, hey, I got to win first before the defending champion and before my teammate, Will Brown, did. So I encourage everyone, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs. Will be on the air tomorrow, approximately 90 minutes following the conclusion of the Ambetter Health 400. Rain is not in the forecast, but just a chilly day. Temperatures in the 50s. So we'll see what happens with the track product. We're going to have plenty to talk about, plus a recap of the Repco Supercar Series season opening race weekend at Sydney Motorsports Park. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, Conchelle, Mark Brown, David, and Matthew, plus everyone that has bought us coffee, YouTube, super chats. We appreciate it. Get your name on the leaderboard. We'll thank you on the air. And you can follow Grid Network across social media at Grid Network TV, including our website, gridnetworktv.com. Matthew Bro has his NASCAR weekly article up. And of course, the Grid Endurance and ranking will be starting up in April. Cannot wait for the first Sunday of April. For Tanner and Jackson, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races.